بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا ورزقا طيبا وشفاء من كل داء. Welcome to lesson 20 of Imam Nawawi's Irshad Tullab al-Haqa'iq, a guide, manual, a text to Hadith classification and methodologies. Today inshallah we will continue covering category 24, the methodology of receiving, transmitting and precisely preserving hadith. I will continue studying, reading from the various types of ijazah and then move on to munawala. The course outcomes are as follows: to understand the foundational categories and reliability of the sunnah. Number 2, to recognize the nuances of hadith terminology and their contextual subtleties. Number 3, to learn the process and requirements for hadith authentication. Finally, grasp the dynamics of hadith transmission and chain evaluation. Today's lesson outcomes are as follows: to understand the conditions for valid ijazah and the various types of ijazah that will be mentioned. Recognize when ijazah, a formal permission by the teacher to the student to narrate hadith, when it is considered to be commendable, whether it is valid, and the various types. Number 3, to identify the qualifications of the teacher and the student, the Shaykh and the Talib, and examine the scholarly views on the conditions of ijazah. Some of the key concepts, words, are mujaz lahu, the one authorized. Ijazah, like I mentioned, it is a formal authorization, formal permission by the teacher to the student to narrate hadith. So mujaz lahu is the student, the one who is authorized. Mujaz bihi, it is the text, that which is authorized. Then we will move on to munawala, which is when a text of hadith is handed over, a book is handed over with authorization. And sometimes this type is when the text is handed over without any ijazah authorization. So these are the two types of munawala: when a text of hadith is handed over with authorization ijazah, or without, which is called munawala mujarrada. So we have done the following categories of hadith, these 11, and then the next 11 until hadith maqloob. Now we are on hadith category 24, continuing from the previous weeks. We will start reading from the subsidiary issue number 5. Subsidiary issue number 5 from the book, page 110. So قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا به وبكم آمين. He says النوع الخامس, the fifth type, الإجازة للمعدوم, if whether hadith authorization can be given to someone who does not exist. This human does not exist. This person does not exist. So واختلف المتأخرون في جوازها. The late scholars, the latter scholars, they differ regarding its permissibility. وصورتها, and the method and the form of it is as follows. وصورتها أن تقول, and its form and its example is as follows, that you say أجزت لمن يولد لفلان, that I give authorization, I give ijaza to لمن يولد لفلان, to those offsprings and descendants and children of so and so, i.e. the unborn offspring, the unborn children of so and so. I give them ijaza. So whether this is permissible or not, there is difference of opinion. He further explains, he says, فإن عطف المعدوم على الموجود فقال أجزت لفلان ومن يولد له أو أجزت لك ولعقبك ما تناسل كان أقرب إلى الجواز من الأول. Then he says that if the non-existent, i.e. those offsprings that are not born yet, if the ma'doom, if the non-existent people are linked to the existent, i.e. those who are alive, فقال أجزت لفلان, I give ijaza to so and so. So this so and so is mawjood, he exists, he's alive. ومن يولد له, and this is ma'doom, so and it is connected to the ma'doom is connected to the mawjood. So ومن يولد له, and those who will be born to him, ومن يولد له, I give ijaza to so and so, and those who will be born to him. So the ma'doom here, the non-existent, are linked to the existent, لفلان. أو أجزت لك ولعقبك ما تناسل. Another way of saying it and giving the ijaza is, I give ijaza to you, i.e. the person who is mawjood, who exists, وَلِعَقِبِكَ مَا تَنَاسَلُوا, and your descendants, and those that will follow you, who will be born. So then he says that كَانَ أَقْرَبْ إِلَى الْجَوَازِ مِنَ الْأَوَّلِ. This is more closer to permissibility than the first. When the first is what? The first type is أَجَزْتُ لِمَنْ يُولَدُ لِفُلَانٍ, when it is linked, when the ijaz is linked to only those who are born. I give ijaza to those who are born, who will be born to so and so. وقد أجاز أصحاب الشافعي في الوقف القسم الثانية دون الأول. The companions of Imam Shafi have allowed and given permissibility if one pauses القسم الثانية during the second type, in the second type and not the first. So if one says أجزت لفلان and he pauses, ومن يولد له, or he says أجزت لك and one pauses, one does waqf, and then he says وَلِعَقْبِكَ مَا تَنَاسَلُوا, then in this way the first type will be permissible. Then this is permissible. وقد أجاز أصحاب الشافعي في الوقف القسم الثانية دون الأول. وأجاز أصحاب مالك وأبي حنيفة القسمين في الوقف، وفعل الثانية في الإجازة من المحدثين أبو بكر بن أبي داود السجستاني. And also the following, the companions Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, they have given permissibility for both during waqf, during the pause. And Imam Abu Bakr Dawud al-Sajistani, the famous Imam, he has acted upon this second type. He has acted upon the second type of ijaza and he has allowed it. وأجاز الخطيب القسم الأول. Khatib Baghdadi has allowed the first type, i.e. one is linked to the non-existent, purely people who do not exist. وحكاه عن ابن الفراء وابن عمروس وحكاه أبو نصر بن الصباغ عن قوم لكونها إذنا ثم أبطله. And this has also been reported from Ibn al-Farra, Ibn Amrus, and also it has been reported from Abu Nasr ibn Sabbagh, from a group of scholars. لِكَوْنِهَا إِذْنًا, because this is also considered to be permission. This is also considered to be permission. Adjust to, because the word has been used, I give permission. However, ثُمَّ أَبْطَلَهُ, then he has rejected it. He has rejected it. Abu Nasr ibn Sabbagh has rejected it. وَبِإِبْطَالِهِ قَالَ الْقَاضِي أَبُو طَيِّبٍ. And also, and this rejection is also quoted by Abu Qadi Abu Tayyib, Tabari too as well. That they allow it, but however eventually they rejected it. وَهُوَ الصَّحِيحُ الَّذِي لَا يَنْبَغِي غَيْرُهُ. and this is the most correct opinion. This is the most correct opinion, that is, this is not allowed. لا ينبغي غيره, because there should be no other. There should be no other case, because here the ijaza is being given to a non-existent person. لأن الإجازة في حكم الإخبار جملة بالمجاز. Because ijaza, when a person gives ijaza, authorization, a formal permission to narrate, what is it? It is a type of ikhbar, informing of hadith to others in its entirety. لأن الإجازة في حكم الإخبار جملة بالمجاز, of what it is being authorized. Whatever is being authorized, the hadith text, the hadith corpus, the hadith collection, one is like giving ikhbar of it, one is informing others of it, one is narrating the hadith. It is like he will eventually narrate the hadith, and this is not permissible, because end of day the ijaza is being given to a non-existent person. ولا يصح الإخبار للمعدوم. One cannot, it is not valid to inform others of something that is non-existent. Ikhbar is not valid. Ikhbar is not valid to something which is not existent. ولو قدرناها إذنا, and if you understand it, and if you assume that it is a type of permission, because the word has been used أجزت, لم يصح أيضا, it is not permissible. Why? كما لا يصح الإذن في باب الوكالة للمعدوم. Just like it is not permissible, just like it is not valid to give permission in the context, in the chapter of agency, to a non-existent person. So just like when agency cannot be given to a non-existent person, similarly when authorization of narrating the hadith cannot be given to a non-existent person. So this is all about ijaza lil ma'doom. So let us look at the slide presentation. So this is issue number 5. So this is subsidiary issue number 5. So definition: ijaza for the non-existent, ijaza lil ma'doom, ijaza lil ma'doom. So this is the 5th type, al-naw'ul khamis, ijaza for a non-existent person, lil ma'doom. So later scholars, al-mutaakhirun, they have differed regarding its permissibility. So what is the form of it? The form of it is ajaztu, I grant ijaza, liman yuladu li fulanin, to whoever will be born, liman yuladu, to whoever will be born to so and so, li fulanin. So the stronger form, which is closer to validity, he says, is as follows. So he says that if the non-existent, the ma'doom, is linked to an existent person, ajastu li fulanin wa man yuladu lahu, such as I grant ijaza, ajastu, to so and so, and whoever will be born to him. So if the ma'doom, whoever will be born, if the ma'doom is connected to, is atf on the mawjood, the existent, then this is permissible. Or to you and your descendants. Here the ma'doom, the non-existent, were not born yet, they are linked to the mawjood. So this is closer to permissibility than the first case. What's the first case? The first case is when it is purely ijaza, when the ijaza is purely given to someone who does not exist. There is no mention of any existent person, like in these 2 examples here. So here the Shafi jurist permitted when one paused. The Shafi jurist permitted the second form linked to an existing person, but not the first, purely non-existent person. The position of the Malikis and the Hanafis is as follows, that they allow both during waqf, during pause. And also this has been acted upon, the second type. The following scholars have been allowed it, and the following scholars have allowed it. وفعل الثانية في الإجازة من المحدثين أبو بكر بن أبي داود السجستاني. So these scholars have allowed it. So the Maliki and the Hanafi jurists permitted both forms of ijaza to the non-existent in waqf. Among hadith scholars, Abu Bakr ibn Abi Dawood Sajistani, the famous scholar of hadith, so he has acted upon the second form too, linked to the existent person in ijaza. So scholars who permitted the first form is also Khatib Baghdadi. And this has been reported, this has been attributed to the view of Ibn al-Farra and Ibn Amruz too as well. So Khatib Baghdadi has permitted the first type when the ijaza is connected to a purely non-existent person, liman yuladu fulanin, to an unborn offspring, unborn descendant, unborn children. Abu Nasr ibn Sabbagh reported it from some scholars. However, he later rejected it, as did Abu Tayyib also, Tabari, the famous scholar. So this is the correct and preferred position. This is the most correct and preferred position. So the strongest view is that it rejects it, because ijaza is what? Ijaza is a form of ikhbar, informing of an entirety of what is being authorized. So authorization cannot be given to a non-existent person. So even if you were to consider and understand it to be a permission, it will still remain invalid. We cannot understand it as permission, because it is like wakala, it is like agency. When a person is given agency, he is made a wakil, and he gives wakala, agency, to a non-existent person. Similarly, you cannot give agency, you cannot give ijazah and permission to a non-existent person. So similar to agency, which cannot apply to the non-existent. The next is whether ijaza can be given to a child, tifl. وَأَمَّا الْإِجَازَةُ لِلطِّفْلِ الَّذِي لَا يُمَيِّزُ فَصَحِيحًا. As for ijaza, which is given to an infant, a child, who does not have tamyiz yet, who does not have the differentiation, the intellect of discerning things, differentiating things between right and wrong, whether this is permissible or not. So he says, فَصَحِيحًا, this is permissible. قطع به القاضي أبو الطيب والخطيب. Qadi Abu Tayyib and Khatib, they have categorically and decisively viewed it as permissible. قال, he says, Abu Tayyib, he says, وعلى هذا أعهدنا شيوخنا كافة يجيزون للأطفال الغيب. That based on this we have found that our mashayikh, our shuyukh, teachers, all of them, they have given ijaza, they have allowed ijaza to be given to children who are absent. ولا يسألون عن أسنانهم وتمييزهم, and they will not question regarding their age and their tamyiz and their age of discernment, whether they have reached the age of discernment or yet or not. لأنها إباحة للرواية, because ijaza is the allowability and the permissibility to narrate hadith. والإباحة تصح للعاقل وغير عاقل, and this type of ibaha, permissibility, is valid whether you give it to a rational person, someone who has sound intellect, or someone who does not have sound intellect yet, like an infant child. قال الخطيب, Khatib Baghdadi says, سألت القاضي أبا الطيب عنها. I asked Qadi Abu Tayyib regarding it further, and فجوزها, and he gave it permissibility, he allowed it. فقلت, so فقلت إن بعض أصحابنا قال لا تصح الإجازة لمن لا يصح سماعه. So Khatib Baghdadi says that I inquired this matter to Qazi Abu Tayyib, and I asked him that some of our ashab, companions of Imam Shafi, they have said that ijaza is not valid for a person whose sama is not valid. Ijaza cannot be given, authorization to narrate hadith cannot be given to someone whom sama is not valid also. Direct hearing is not valid also. If they were to do sama, just like it is not valid, similarly, ijaza should not be valid too as well. So لا تصح الإجازة لمن لا يصح سماعه. That ijaza is not valid for someone for whom sama is not valid. فقال, he said, يصح أن يجيز للغائب. It is valid that one can give ijaza to someone who is absent. ولا يصح سماعه. It is another matter that sama is not valid. The hearing might not be valid because the person has not reached the age of discernment. However, ijaza is valid. So let us look at the slide. Ijaza for a discerning child. الإجازة للطفل الذي لا يميز. So as for granting ijaza to a non-discerning child who lacks the tamyiz, who cannot differentiate between right and wrong, this is valid. So this was decisively affirmed, قطع به, affirmed and categorically affirmed by Qadi Abu Tayyib and Khatib Baghdadi. Scholarly practice is mentioned regarding this. Why? Teachers have granted ijaza even to infants. Al-Atfal al-Ghayyab. Infants, children that are not present. They are children, they are infants, they are young, too young. Age or understanding was not required. 3, ijaza was viewed as simple permission. Yeah. So, and permission can be applied to both rational people, i.e. people who have sound intellect, and non-rational people, i.e. children who are yet infants. So there was a direct inquiry made by Khatib Baghdadi to Qadi Abu Tayyib. So he asked him that, I asked Qadi Abu Tayyib about it and he permitted it. So some scholars, then the objection was raised that some scholars say ijaza is invalid for one whose hearing sama is invalid. So this was a principle that he mentioned, and like an objection that some scholars have said that ijaza is invalid for someone whose hearing sama is invalid. So the response given by Qadi Abu Tayyib was, it is valid to grant ijaza to someone who is absent because it is only an ijaza, authorization, even though their hearing, direct hearing, sama is not valid. So ijaza is valid to discerning and non-discerning children both. النوع السادس. The sixth issue is إجازة ما لم يسمعه المجيز ولم يتحمله بوجه ليرويه المجاز له إذا تحمله المجيز. So this is ijaza, granting ijaza to whom? ما لم يسمعه المجيز. When a mujiz, a person who gives ijaza, i.e. the shaykh, the teacher, he gives ijaza to something, a material which he has not heard yet. He has not done sama of it yet. وَلَمْ يَتَحَمَّلْهُ بِوَجْهٍ, and he has not received it in any way. وَلَمْ يَتَحَمَّلْهُ بِوَجْهٍ لِيَرْوِيَهُ الْمُجَازُ لَهُ, and he gives ijaza to the mujaz lahu, to the person, so to narrate, but yet he has not been given ijaza. So however he says إِذَا تَحَمَّلَهُ الْمُجِيز, when the teacher is, when he acquires it. So he says that I am giving you ijaza, yet even though I've not heard the masmu'at, the narrations yet, but when I acquire it, when I eventually acquire it, I give you ijaza of it. When I acquire it. So is this way of giving ijaza permissible or not? So قال القاضي الحافظ العياض قاضي حافظ عياض, he says لم أرى من تكلم على هذا النوع من المشايخ. I have not observed any of the mashayikh who have spoken about this type of ijazah. قال, he says, وَرَأَيْتُ بَعْضَ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ وَالْعَصْرِيِّينَ يَصْنَعُونَهُ. However, I have seen some of the latter scholars, and some of the contemporaries, they have engaged in this. That despite not having sama of the hadith collection, or neither acquiring it, they have given ijazah. Why? Because they condition it that when we eventually get the ijazah, you are given the ijazah. We are giving you the ijazah of it. ثم حكى عن أبي الوليد يونس بن مغيث قاضي قرطبة أنه منع ذلك. Then it has been reported from Abu al-Walid Yunus ibn Mughith, he says, who is the Qadi, the judge of the Cordoba, that he has forbidden this. So قال القاضي عياض, the famous scholar, he says, وهذا هو الصحيح, this is the correct opinion. وهذا الذي صحه عياض هو الصواب. And then Imam Nawawi says that this what is mentioned by Qadi Iyad, this is the most correct and strongest of views. فعلى هذا, based on this, فعلى هذا, it becomes clear, يتعين على أن من أراد أن يروي عن شيخ أجاز له جميع مسموعاته بأي عبارة أجاز أن يبحث حتى يعلم أن هذا مما تحمله شيخه قبل الإجازة. So this is not permissible because the sheikh has not been given ijazah yet. He has not done sama of it yet. So based on this, that it becomes clear and specified that whoever intends to narrate hadith from a sheikh, الشيخ أجاز له جميع مسموعاته بأي عبارة أجاز. And a sheikh who has given him ijazah of all his narrations, in whichever way he has given him ijazah, this student, he has to explore and verify حتى يعلم, until he comes to know that أن هذا مما تحمله, that these masmu'at that I am being given ijazah of, that this ijazah, that this sheikh has done tahammul of it, he has acquired it, he has learnt it from others. حتى يعلم أن هذا مما تحمله شيخه قبل الإجازة, until he comes to know that these masmu'at, these narrations that I have been given ijazah to, are those narrations that his sheikh, that this teacher has acquired, and he has learned it, and he has heard it from another person. قبل الإجازة, before he was given the ijazah. So a student has to know and explore and verify whether his teacher was given ijazah and whether he did sama of it before he gave the ijazah. So let us look at the slide. النوع السادس. So النوع السادس is about إجازة ما لم يسمعه المجيز, granting ijazah, authorization, formal permission for hadith material. The recipient has not heard nor received it in any form. So the teacher, he has not heard it yet, or neither he has received it in any form, and he grants ijazah so that this person, he narrates it once, and he grants ijazah based on that once the grantor, he later acquires it, so that he may narrate it once the grantor later acquires it. So what is the scholarly observation to this type of ijazah? Qadi Iyad has said, I have not seen any earlier scholars, lam ara man takallama, who have discussed this type of ijazah. However, he has observed some later scholars practicing it. يصنعونه. However, the scholarly verdict is that it is prohibited, and this is the correct position. Abu al-Walid Yunus ibn Mughith, he prohibited this form, and Qadi Iyad, he has affirmed it that this is the correct position, that it is not allowed. So the view affirmed by Qadi Iyaz is considered to be correct. So based on this, one narrating through a general ijaza, he has to verify the source. فعلى هذا يتعين على أن من أراد أن يروي عن شيخ. So the principle is now that a person who narrates through a general ijaza, he has to verify and find out the source. A narrator must verify that the Shaykh had received the narration before granting ijaza. This is the summary of this matter. Continuing, ولو قال أجزت لك ما صح أو يصح عندك من مسموعاتي. If one says that I give you ijaza, if the Shaykh teacher says that I give you ijaza, ما صح, whatever is correct, whatever is established, أو يصح عندك, or that will become established from my أو يصح عندك من مسموعاتي, from my narrations. أجزت لك ما صح أو يصح عندك, or in the future it becomes established. Those narrations I give you ijaza. فليس هو من هذا القبيل. So then this is not from the problematic type. Because he is saying that I'm giving you ijaza what is established now, and also that will be established in the future. So he's pointing out to this future hadith collection. So وقد فعله الدارقطني وغيره. Imam Darqutni and others, they have practiced this, they have acted upon this. وجائز أن يروي بذلك, and it is permissible to narrate in this manner. ما صح عنده, that which is established with him, with the teacher. أنه سمعه قبل الإجازة, that he has heard the hadith collection before he is giving the ijaza. Why? لأن الذي ذكره مقتضى الإطلاق, because what he has mentioned here, أجزت لك ما صح أو يصح عندك, what he has mentioned here, it will fulfill the general requirement of the wording. It will fulfill the general requirement. مقتضى requirement. Al-Itlaq means the generality of the wording, because eventually he will get the ijaza. He will get the ijaza of those masmu'at, those narrations in the future. أنه سمعه قبل الإجازة لأن الذي ذكره مقتضى الإطلاق, because what he has mentioned here in the above ibara, above ijaza and wording, it will fulfill the general requirement of the wording. So let us look at the text. So there's an important exception, a conditional ijaza. أجزت لك ما صح أو يصح عندك, that whatever is or becomes established of my narrations in the future. So however, if the wording is I grant you ijaza for whatever is or becomes established in the future as my narrations, now he's linking this ijaza to the correct narrations that will be heard by him, then this is not a problematic type, and it was practiced by the scholars like Imam Darqutni. So he may narrate through this type of ijaza, through this way. This is the operational rule. So only what is verified as previously heard. So whatever is heard and it was correct and established, he can narrate it. So this follows from the general wording of the authorization, because what he has mentioned here is what it fulfills the general requirement. It fulfills the general requirement. He has mentioned ma saha, whatever is correct, or yasihu, or whatever will be correct and established in the future from my narrations. So this type of ijaza is permissible. So this was the fifth type, al-ijazatu lil-ma'dum, and the surrounding discussions that we just went through. The second is النوع السابع إجازة المجاز, the authorization of the mujaz, of the authorized. النوع السابع إجازة المجاز, giving ijaza and authorization of the mujaz, of what one is authorized with, كقول الشيخ, like when the sheikh and the teacher, when he says أجزت لك مجازاتي, I give you ijaza, authorization, formal permission to narrate hadith of all my authorized narrations, mujazati. أو أجزت لك ما أجيز لي, or I give you ijaza to you of what has been authorized to me. Ma ujiza, passive form, passive verb. What has been authorized to me. So فمنع من ذلك بعض من لا يعتد به من المتأخرين. So some of those whose views are not given any weight, they have forbidden this type of ijaza. And these scholars are from the متأخرين, later scholars. So فمنع من ذلك بعض من لا يعتد به من المتأخرين. So this has been forbidden and rejected by some of the later scholars whose views are not considered, whose views are not given any weight. من لا يعتد به. However, the correct opinion is والصحيح والذي عليه الأمل جوازه, that the correct opinion that it is permissible. وبه قطع الحفاظ الأعلام, and this is what the masters of hadith, the great personalities and the prominent scholars of hadith masters have decisively and categorically mentioned. وبه قطع الحفاظ الأعلام, like Abu al-Hasan Daraqutni, Abu al-Abbas ibn Uqda, Abu Nu'aym al-Asbahani, Abu al-Fath Nasr ibn Ibrahim al-Maqdisi, وغيرهم and others. وكان أبو الفتح يروي بالإجازة. Abu al-Fath, he used to narrate hadith via an ijaza, and also not only that, وربما والى بين إجازات ثلاث, and sometimes when he used to narrate hadith, he used to narrate multiple ijazat through multiple ways of through multiple chains of ijaza, and sometimes he used to narrate hadith by mentioning that he has three ijazat, he has three authorizations. I have ijaza from this person, I have ijaza from this second person, and I have ijaza to narrate the hadith from this third person too as well. So وينبغي لمن يروي بها أن يتأمل كيفية إجازة الشيخ شيخه لئلا يروي ما لم يندرج تحتها. And it is appropriate for a person who narrates hadith, through an ijaza, whenever a person narrates hadith through an ijaza, it is appropriate for him أن يتأمل, that he should examine and carefully examine كيفية إجازة الشيخ شيخه, the scope of the ijaza of the sheikh of his sheikh, the form and the scope of the ijaza of the sheikh of his sheikh, إجازة الشيخ شيخه لئلا يروي ما لم يندرج تحتها, so in order that he does not end up narrating hadith which does not come under it, which is not part of it. فإن كان صورة إجازة الشيخ شيخه, if the form of the ijaza of the sheikh of his sheikh is as follows: أجزت له ما صح عنده من سماعي, that I give him ijaza of what is established with him from my sama', from my direct hearing. If this is the form, فرأى شيئا من سماع الشيخ شيخه, then he observed something from the sama' of the sheikh of his sheikh. فليس له أن يرويه عن شيخه عنه, so then it is not permissible for him to narrate the hadith from his sheikh. فليس له أن يرويه عن شيخه عنه. Why? حتى يستبين أنه مما كان قد صح عند شيخه, until it becomes clear that whatever he is narrating, it is fully, authentically established from his sheikh, and it is كونه من مسموعة شيخه الذي تلك إجازته, and it is it is 100%, it is from the heard narrations of his Shaykh, who has the ijazah, who has this ijazah. وَهَذِهِ دَقِيقَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. So this marks a very good nuance and subtle principle in hadith methodology, that one also has to look into the ijazah of the Shaykh of his Shaykh, whether he heard it or not, and it is established and proven or not. So let us look at the slide, and this remaining discussion, this seventh type of ijazatul mujaz, authorizing what the teacher has been authorized with. So this is such, when a teacher says, I authorize you with my authorizations, mujazati, or I authorize you what has been authorized to me, ma ujizali. So there is scholarly disagreement, and however there is a dominant position. So some later scholars, mutaakhirin, whose views are not given any consideration, so they have rejected this form of authorization. But the correct view is, and which is acted upon as well, وَالَّذِي عَلَيْهِ الْأَمَلُ, that it is permissible. So the authorities who approve of it is these great personalities and hadith masters: وَبِهِ قَطَعَ الْحُفَّاظُ الْأَعْلَامُ أبو الحسن الدارقطني, أبو العباس بن عقدة, أبو نعيم الأصبهاني, أبو الفتح نصر بن إبراهيم المقدسي, and others. So this is the view upheld by leading hadith scholars: Daraqutni, Ibn Uqda, Nu'aym Isbahani, and Ibn Ibrahim al-Maqdisi. So the practical application, how scholars have used it, there's an example. Abul Fath, he says, is mentioned that he would narrate via ijazah. He was given ijazah, so he would narrate. And at times he would transmit through 3 consecutive authorizations, 1, 2, and 3, that I bring ijazah from by 1 and by 2 and by 3, by a third person too as well. So caution in using ijaz al-mujaz. There has to be a caution when one uses ijazah, authorization of what has been authorized to a person. So this is the proper way. One has to examine the authorization carefully, verify scope, kayfiyya, ijazah, and look at the ijazah of the Shaykh of his Shaykh too as well, and narrate only what is included, so to avoid that which is not included, to avoid transmitting unauthorized material. لِأَلَّا يَرْوِيَ مَا لَمْ يَنْدَرِجْ تَحْتَهَا. So then there's a condition limitation to this, and this is the proper way, that one has to check the exact wording of the ijazah. So, then number 2, verify what is truly established from the teacher's hearing. And do not assume all attributed narrations are included until it becomes clear. حتى يستبين. So فليس له أن يرويه عن شيخه عنه حتى يستبين أنه مما كان قد صح عند شيخه. So narrate only what is clearly verified from the narrations of the Shaykh, and he was given the ijazah. So this is this marks a very good and a subtle nuance principle in hadith methodology. So one should not narrate through the teacher without verification. Confirm it with authentically established ways. Ensure it belongs to the teacher's heard material. And verify it falls within the granted ijazah. الذي تلك إجازته. So this whole discussion and point, it reflects a very subtle principle, دقيقة حسنة, in hadith methodology. So this was the 7th type. Now he mentions some furu', subsidiary issues, which we will read. الأول قال أبو الحسين أحمد بن فارس الأديب. Here he talks about what is ijaza, what is the connection between the lexical and the technical meaning of ijaza. He says الإجازة في كلام العرب مأخوذة من جواز الماء الذي استسقاه الماشية والحرث. Ijaza in the Arabic language, in the Arabic speech, it originates, it is based on, it derives, it is taken from جواز الماء الذي تسقاه الماشية والحرث, the flowing of water. The literal meaning of ijaza, i.e. jim waw za, jawazul ma, jaza yajuzu. So jawazul ma. So jawazul ma is said the flowing of water, alladhi tusqahu al-mashiya, which the livestock is given to, the water from the flowing water which is given to the mashiya, the livestock, and the water that is given to and irrigated to the land and crops. This is what jawaz means. When water is crossed over and given to the livestock, or when water is crossed over and given to drink to the livestock, and also the water is given and irrigated as an irrigation to the land. So يقال, it is said, منها استجزت فلانا فأجازني, that I asked for water to be crossed over, then he allowed it for me. He allowed the water to flow over to me. إذا أسقاك ماء لماشيتك أو أرضك, when you give water, when you ask for water for your livestock, أو أرضك, or for your land. إذا أسقاك ماء لماشيتك أو أرضك. كذلك طالب العلم, likewise the student of knowledge, the student of Hadith sciences. What does he do? يسأل العالم أن يجيزه علمه فيجيزه. He asked the alim, the scholar of Hadith, the Shaykh al-Hadith, he asked him to be granted ijaza. So he grants him ijaza. So just like a person, when he asks for water for his livestock or for his land, and he is given the permissibility and the water is crossed over to him. فعلى هذا يجوز أن يقول الشيخ. So based on this, it is permissible that the Shaykh says to the student, أجزت فلانا مسموعاتي أو مروياتي. So I give so and so ijaza, authorization, formal permission to narrate all my heard narrations, all my marwiyat narrations. So this way of giving ijaza, أجزت فلانا مسموعاتي أو مروياتي, these wordings, it is permissible, this type of wording, فيعديه بغير حرف جر من غير حاجة إلى ذكر لفظ الرواية. Here the Shaykh, if one uses this type of wording, it has been transited, the verb has been transited without the usage of the particle of jar, without the usage of harful jar, without the need of using the word riwayah too as well, without the need of using the word riwayah too. ويحتاج إلى ذلك من يجعل الإجازة إذنا. If you look here, أجزت فلان مسموعاتي أو مروياتي, أجزت is فعل فاعل and مسموعاتي and مرويات is مفعول. So the transition here of the maf'ul is without harful jar, without the particle of jar. And there's also no mention of the word riwayah too as well. However, he says that ويحتاج إلى ذلك من يجعل الإجازة إذنا. One is in need of the word riwayah. Some have considered that it is important to use the word riwayah. Those who have considered ijaza to be a formal permission, ويحتاج إلى ذلك من يجعل الإجازة إذنا. And there is need of the word riwayah to be mentioned, according to those who have considered ijaza to be idhn, permission. وهو المعروف, and this is well known. So فيقول أجزت لفلان رواية مسموعاتي. So in this way, based on this understanding and view, one will say, I give ijaza to so and so رواية مسموعاتي. Here the word riwayah has been used. ومن يقول منهم أجزت له مسموعاتي. There are those who have also used the following way as well, and they say ومن يقول منهم, and those who have said from amongst the scholars, I give ijaza to so and so of my heard narrations. So sometimes the word riwayah is not mentioned and it is mahzuf and hidden. So this is also permissible. So in that case, it will be assumed that the word riwayah is hidden. فعلى الحذف, it will be based on hadf, i.e. it will be assumed and understood to be mahzuf, hidden. كما في نظائره, like there are many other examples too as well. Sometimes a word is mahzuf, hidden. Just like here, أجزت له مسموعاتي, أي أجزت له رواية مسموعاتي. So this was as discussion regarding the lexical and technical meaning of ijaza and the connection between the two. So let us look at the presentation. The linguistic root of ijaza. What is the connection between the linguistic root, linguistic meaning, and the technical meaning? So this is a subsidiary issue discussion. Ibn Faris explains that the term ijaza in Arabic, it originates, ma'khudha, it is taken from jawazul ma. Ijaza means, the literal meaning is the flowing of water used for livestock and to irrigate crops, used to allow the livestock to drink it from it, and also which is used to irrigate the crops. So istajaztu, when this is said, it means I sought water and it was granted, for ajazani. So water was provided for livestock or land. Water was provided for livestock or land. I sought water for my livestock or land and I was granted it, for ajazani. So the connection and the analogy between the two is a student seeks authorization from a scholar. So the scholar grants knowledge when he seeks it. Similarly, just as water is granted for sustenance, for the livestock and for the crops. So based on this, it is valid for a teacher to say, I authorized so and so my narrations, without the need of a proper preposition like ba, harful jar. So when ijaz is treated as permission, then there's another view. So there's no need to explicitly say narration in this phrasing. However, those who define ijaza and understand ijaza to be a formal permission, these scholars say that a more explicit wording is important, i.e. the mentioning of the word riwayah is needed in this case. So like here, I authorize so and so to narrate my transmissions. Here if you look, the word riwayah has been used. So these scholars say that the word riwayah has to be mentioned because ijaza is a formal permission and idhn. And sometimes the word riwayah can be hidden. So as for those who say I authorize him my narrations, this is based on an omission, hazf, and it is understood implicitly to narrate. So when يقول منهم أجزت لهم مسموعاتي, so فعل الحذف, it will be assumed that the word riwayah has been omitted, like it is the case in Arabic many times. continuing with the discussion, the second is الثاني إنما يستحسن الإجازة إذا كان المجيز عالما بما يجيز. So who can give ijaza? What are the conditions of the mujiz, the one granting ijaza? So إنما يستحسن, it is deemed, considered good and approved that ijaza, إنما يستحسن ijaza, ijaza is, the granting of ijaza is good when the mujiz, when the person granting ijaza is an alim, is a scholar, is a learned scholar of what he is granting ijaza. وَالْمُجَازُ لَهُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ, and the person who is being granted ijaza, i.e. the student, he is also from the scholars, from the people of knowledge, min أهل العلم. So the mujaz, the student, has to be from the ahlul ilm too as well. لأنها توسع يحتاج إليها أهل العلم, because this is a scholarly concession. This is a scholarly ijaza, end of day, is a type of a scholarly concession. One is not narrating the entire hadith in front of the student. One is only granting authorization of the hadith words that are mentioned in a hadith book. So لأنها توسع يحتاج إليها أهل العلم, because it is a scholarly concession which the people of knowledge are in need of. وشرط بعضهم ذلك فيها, and some of them have conditioned this. وحكي اشتراط عن مالك, this has been conditioned from Imam Malik رحمه الله. وقال الحافظ أبو عمر ابن عبد البر الصحيح أنها لا تجوز إلا لماهر بالصناعة وفي شيء معين لا يشكل إسناده. However, the correct opinion is, like mentioned by Ibn Abdul Barr, the famous Cordobian scholar, he says that the correct opinion and the strongest opinion is that ijaz is not permissible except someone who is a master, who is a skilled master, who is an expert in hadith, in the discipline of hadith. وفي شيء معين, and also he is a master and he can give ijaza into the specific material, and this specific material is not something which is unambiguous. It has to be strong, based on evidence. There's no ambiguity in it. It has to be clear. i.e. the ijaza that he is giving the mujaz bihi, the hadith collection, has to be correct. There should be no ambiguity. وفي شيء معين, and he has to give ijaza in a specific material, and this material is what should be لا يشكل إسناده. Its isnad, its chain, should not have any difficult issues, i.e. it has to be clear and not ambiguous. So this was all about the mujiz, the person who is giving ijaza. The person who is giving ijaza, he has to be a man of knowledge, a scholar of knowledge. So conditions for proper ijaza and the rationale behind the condition. So ijaza is preferred for qualified students, and the teacher, he should know what he is authorizing, because end of the ijaza, it is a tawassu', it is a scholarly concession. Why is it considered to be a scholarly concession? Because it is not, the hadith in its entirety is not read. He is only granting him ijaza that all this hadith collection, these words of the Prophet ﷺ, these are words that you can narrate. He has not verbally read and recited these prophetic words. So some scholars made this a condition. And this opinion is held by Imam Malik. Ibn Abdul Barr's position, and which is a correct view, that ijaza is only valid for someone who is skilled in the discipline of hadith and for specific material. And this material of hadith, whose chain of transmission, it has to be clear and unambiguous. لا يشكل إسناده, the chain should not have any type of ambiguity. The second discussion is الثالث ينبغي للمجيز إذا كتب إجازة أن يتلفظ بها. That ينبغي للمجيز, it is appropriate for the mujiz, for the person who is granting ijaza, that he writes the ijaza. He writes the ijaza. He has to write it out for the student. ينبغي للمجيز إذا كتب إجازة, when he writes the ijaza, أن يتلفظ بها, that he should also say it too as well. Not just write it, he should also pronounce it and say it. Pronounce it verbally. فإذا اقتصر على الكتابة كانت إجازة جائزة. If he suffices only with writing and he gives him a certificate like many do like nowadays, فإذا اقتصر على الكتابة كانت إجازة جائزة. This is also permissible. إذا اقترن بقصد الإجازة, as long it is accompanied and connected with the intention of ijaza. So if the written ijaza is accompanied with the intention of ijaza without saying it and pronouncing it, this also suffices too as well. كما جعلنا القراءة على الشيخ إخبارا بما قرئ عليه ولم يتلفظ إلا أنها دون الملفوظ بها في المرتبة والله أعلم. Just like we have considered and understood that قراءة على الشيخ, when a person reads to the sheikh, it is considered to be إخبار of what is being recited. It is considered to be إخبار بما قرئ عليه, even though reading to the teacher is without any verbal response. ولم يتلفظ, even though there is no verbal response by the teacher, but the student is reading to the teacher, though the teacher is not responding, this is still considered to be an ijaza, an ikhbar, in other words. إلا أنها دون الملفوظ بها. However, ijaza على الكتابة, when ijaza is based on just writing, when ijaza is only given in writing, this is lesser in rank than when it is given with pronunciation, when it is verbally pronounced and said and uttered and given to the student. إلا أنها دون الملفوظ بها في المرتبة. However, إجازة على الكتابة, when ijaza is written down without saying it and pronouncing it by the teacher, this is lesser in rank. Wallahu alam. So this is written ijaza and its rank. So it is recommended that when a scholar writes an ijaza, he should also pronounce it verbally, say it verbally. However, if ijaza is only written down, it is still valid, provided the intention of the teacher is present. This is similar to when a student reads to the teacher and the teacher does not do any verbal response. This is still considered to be ikhbar. However, a written ijaza without a verbal pronunciation, it is lower in rank. However, it is a lower in rank than verbal ijaza. Now the fourth type, al-qism al-rabi'. We have completed the discussion on ijaza and its various types. Now we'll move on to the fourth type, min aqsami turuq tahammul hadith, from the types of the methods of acquiring hadith. Munawala, which is what? Munawala is of two types. Munawala is when a hadith collection is handed over to the student, or the student hands over the hadith collection to the teacher. So وهي نوعان. Munawala is of two types. أحدهما مناولة مقرونة بالإجازة. The first type is munawala, when a hadith collection is handed over with accompanied with ijaza too as well. The hadith collection is handed over by the teacher to the student, and also the teacher, he permits the student to narrate hadith too. وهي أعلى أنواع الإجازة على الإطلاق. This is the highest type of ijaza على الإطلاق, without any exception, without any condition, unconditionally, i.e. without any conditions. وَلَهَا صُوَرٌ, and there are many forms. There are many forms of munawala. You will understand what is munawala by we will look into the various types. So the first type is منها أن يدفع الشيخ إليه أصل سماعه أو فرعا مقابلا به. The first type of munawala is when the Shaykh hands over the hadith collection إليه, to him, إليه إلى الطالب الراغب في تلقي الحديث, to the, like it is mentioned in the footnote, to the student of knowledge, to the student of hadith, who has desire to learn hadith, acquire hadith. So the hadith collection is given to the student by the teacher. أن يدفع الشيخ إليه أصل سماعه, he gives him the original copy أصل سماعه, أو فرعا مقابلا به, or he gives him a secondary, a far', not the asal, he gives him a far', secondary copy, a verified copy, a compared copy, مقابلا به, which has been verified and compared. So the original copy is not given, but a secondary copy is given that has been copied out and verified. ويقول, and then the teacher says, هذا سماعي أو روايتي عن فلان فروه عنه. These are my direct hearings and transmissions, and my riwayat. This is my narration from so and so teacher. So you can narrate from me, فروه عني. Or the teacher might say, أجزت لك روايته عني, that I give formal authorization to you to narrate from me, روايته عني. ثم يبقيه معه تمليكا أو لينسخه أو نحوه. Then the teacher he allows the copy to remain with the student. ثم يبقيه معه تمليكا, in ownership of the student, or he doesn't give him he doesn't give the copy in ownership. However, he gives the copy to the student to write it down, to copy it out, or نحوه, or similar manner. So in other words, he gives the actual copy in ownership, or he gives the copy to copy it out. So this is the first type of munawala, and the most important one. So let us look at the slide. Munawala is of two types. What is munawala? Munawala is from the fourth category of the methods of receiving hadith. So this is a method of receiving hadith. Sometimes the hadith is received through munawala. So the two types are munawala when it is combined with ijaza, which is the highest form of ijaza, without any exception. The first form of munawala is the teacher gives his original text, asla, or verified copy, or far'an muqabalan bihi. He identifies it as his hearing or narration. Hada samai or riwayati. He says that. So when he says this, hada samai or riwayati an fulanin farwi anhu, so this person now can narrate the hadith. Now what he does is the teacher, he either he gives the copy to the student, so the text may be kept there by the student, or remains with the student, or it is copied out or owned by the student. So this is the first type of this is a kind of munawala. ومنها, another form of munawala is أن يدفع الطالب إلى الشيخ كتابا من حديثه. This is when the student he comes to the teacher. The student comes to the teacher, and the student he presents the teacher with a book of hadith. And the Shaykh, what he does is فيتأمله الشيخ. The Shaykh, the teacher, he reviews it and he looks into it. whether it is his collection, whether it is his sama', it is his hearing or not. وهو عارف متيقظ. This Shaykh is arif, he is a learned person and he is alert, he is fully alert. ثم يعيد إليه, then he returns it to him. ويقول, and he returns it back to the student and he says that yes, هو حديثي, this is my hadith, أو روايتي, and these are my narrations, عن شيوخي, from my shuyukh, فروه عنه, so you can narrate these hadith from me. Or he says أو أجزت لك روايته, or I give you ijaza to narrate these hadith. وهذا سماه غير واحد من أئمة الحديث عرضا. Many of the imams, more than one from the imams of hadith, they have termed this type of munawala as arz, presentation, because the student, he presents the hadith collection to the teacher. وقد سبق أن القراءة على الشيخ تسمى عرضا. It has also been mentioned before that when hadith is read out to the student, to the teacher, when hadith is read out to the teacher, this is called arz. So similarly here what happens is the student is giving a hadith collection to the teacher. So it is like qira'ah al-shaykh. Just like reading to the teacher is called arz, similarly when a hadith collection is given to the teacher, this is also a type of arz too as well, i.e. a presentation. However, فَلْيُسَمَّ هَذَا عَرْض الْمُنَاوَلَةِ. So let us name, this can be named as عرض المناولة. So let this be named عرض المناولة. And وذاك عرض القراءة, and that can be named as عرض القراءة. When the student reads to the teacher and presents the hadith collection by reading it in front of him, this is عرض القراءة, which was previously mentioned. So وهذه المناولة حالة محل السماع عند مالك وجماعة من أصحاب الحديث. So let us look at the slide before looking into the issue in detail and who have supported this type of and this second form of munawala. So this second form of munawala is when the student presents a hadith book to the teacher. Then the teacher reviews it, فَيَتَأَمَّلُ الشَّيْخ, and he confirms it. وَهُوَ عَارِفٌ مُتَيَقِّظٌ, he confirms it, and then he returns it back to him, and he grants him permission to narrate. He says, هُوَ حديثي أو روايتي عن شيوخي فروه عني. So this type of munawala is called, this type of arz is called arzul munawala. So this was called ard, presentation, by hadith scholars. So the previous type of ard, which was mentioned before, is called arzul qira, ardul qira, and this type of this presentation which we are discussing now is called arzul munawala. So reading to a teacher is also called presentation. Reading to a teacher is also called presentation, which was discussed before. So this is known as presentation of munawala. Presentation of munawala. Why? Because the student is presenting by handing over the hadith collection. And the previous was called arzul qira, because the student is reading to the teacher verbally, reading out all the hadith in front of him. So that is called, which was mentioned before, arzul qira. So who considers this type of munawala, who is of this view? وهذه المناولة حالة محل السماع عند مالك وجماعة من أصحاب الحديث. This type of munawala is, this form is equal to direct hearing. It will be understood that this type of munawala, when the student gives a hadith collection to the teacher and the teacher confirms it and he allows him to narrate it, this is considered to be a form of sama, direct hearing, according to Imam Malik and a group of Ashab al-Hadith. وحكى الحاكم في عرض المناولة المذكور أنه سماع عن ابن شهاب الزهري وربيعة ويحيى بن سعيد الأنصاري ومالك وآخرين من المدنيين. Imam Hakim, he quotes regarding Arz al-Munawala that has been mentioned before, that had just been mentioned, that this is also Sama. Imam Hakim also says that this is a type of Sama too as well. Arz al-Munawala is a type of Sama, direct hearing. And he quotes Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, Rabi'a, Yahya bin Sa'id al-Ansari, Malik, وآخرين من المدنيين, other scholars from Medina. Just like Imam Malik was Medina, other scholars from Medina also are of this view. ومجاهد وابن الزبير وابن عيينة وآخرين من المكيين. And these are all, these scholars too as well, and others from Mecca. وعلقمة وإبراهيم النخعي والشعبي وآخرين من الكوفيين. علقمة, Ibrahim Nakhi, Shabi, and others from Kufa. وقتادة وأبو العالية وابن المتوكل الناجي وآخرين من البصريين. And these scholars, Qatada, Abu al-Aliya, Abu al-Mutawakkil al-Naji, and other Basran scholars. وابن وهب وابن القاسم وأشهب وآخرين من المصريين والشاميين والخراسانيين. And all these scholars too as well. Ibn Wahab, Ibn Qasim, Ibn Ashhab, and other scholars from Misr, from the Levant area, and from the Khurasanan area. All of them. وَرَأَى الْحَاكِمُ طَائِفَةً مِّن مَشَايِخِ عَلَيْهِ. Then he mentions that Imam Hakim, he has also observed a group of his teachers. He has also observed a group of his teachers holding this view too as well. Following this view. So let us look at the slide presentation. The status of Munawala among scholars. So this form of Munawala may equal direct hearing. And this view has been held by Imam Malik and some Hadith scholars, Ashab al-Hadith. Hakim Nishapuri, Imam Hakim Nishapuri here, he also considered this to be equivalent to hearing too as well. And he has mentioned the following scholars, following supporting views from the scholars. All these other scholars from the various areas and regions that have supported this view. So there's a broader scholarly consensus, in other words. So Hakim, then he mentioned that Hakim also observed a group of his own teachers holding this view. So however, the correct position on Munawala is as follows. He says, وَالصَّحِيحُ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ مُنْحَطٌ عَنْ دَرْجَةِ التَّحْدِيثِ لَفْظًا وَالْإِخْبَارِ قِرَاءَةً. The correct opinion and the stronger opinion is that Arzul Munawala is lower in rank. It is lower in rank than what? Munhattun, inhatta yanhattu, inhitat. It is lower in rank than عن درجة تحديث لفظا إخبار قراءة. What does that mean? تحديث لفظا إخبار قراءة means that it is lower in rank than direct hearing, than sama. It is not sama. It is lower in rank. It is lower in rank. قال الحاكم. Hakim, he says, أما فقهاء الإسلام الذين أفتوا في الحلال والحرام فلم يروه سماعا. وبه قال سفيان الثوري والأوزاعي وأبو حنيفة والشافعي والبويطي والمزني وأحمد بن حنبل وابن المبارك ويحيى بن يحيى وإسحاق بن راهويه. He says that Hakim says, he quotes, as for the fuqaha, the jurists of Islam, who have given legal opinions on halal and haram, they have not observed this to be sama. They have not also observed this to be sama. And this opinion is followed and viewed by the following scholars: Sufyan al-Thawri, Awza'i, Abu Hanifa, Shafi, al-Buwaiti, Muzani, Ahmad bin Hanbal, Ibn Mubarak, Yahya ibn Ishaq, Yahya ibn Yahya, and Ishaq ibn Rahawai, rahimahullahu jami'an. May Allah have mercy on them all. قال Hakim, so Hakim concludes, he says, وَعَلَيْهِ أَعِدْنَا أَئِمَّتَنَا. Upon this view that we have found our Imams, وَإِلَيْهِ ذَهَبُوا, and to this view that they have gone, they have followed, وَإِلَيْهِ نَذْهَبْ, and also to this view that we will also follow. We will also follow this opinion and this view also. Wallahu alam. So the correct position of munawala is as follows. The stronger view is that it is ranked below direct hearing. He has used the word تحديث لفظا إخبار قراءة عن درجة التحديث لفظا والإخبار قراءة. So Arzul Munawala is below direct hearing. It is also below reading based on transmission. So Hakim Nishapuri, he noted that jurists did not treat it as direct hearing, and he quotes all the following scholars. So this opinion is held by all these scholars. So Hakim concludes that this is the position of our Imams. We have found our Imams based on this position. وَإِلَيْهِ ذَهَبُوا, they have gone towards this opinion. وَإِلَيْهِ نَذْهَبْ, and we will also go towards this opinion. Another form of munawala, ومن صورها أن يناول الشيخ الطالب كتابه ويجيز له روايته. Another form of ijaza is that the Shaykh, he hands over the student his book. أن يناول الشيخ الطالب كتابه. That the Shaykh, teacher, he hands over the student his book and he grants him ijaza to narrate the hadith. ويجيز له أي روايته ثم يمسكه. This is the difference. Then the teacher ثم يمسكه الشيخ عنده. Then after handing over the book to the student, the Shaykh, he takes it back and he holds the copy. He keeps the copy with him. فهذا يتقاعد عن ما سبق. This is a weaker opinion than the previous. ويجوز له رواية ذلك إذا ظفر بالكتاب أو بمقابل به على وجه يثق معه بموافقته لما تناوله الإجازة كما هو معتبر في الإجازة المجردة عن المناولة. However, although it is weaker than the previous, the student can narrate the hadith if he was to succeed in finding an original copy or a verified copy from a source that can be trusted and agrees what has been heard. So ويجوز له رواية ذلك. So despite the teacher taking back the original copy, it is still permissible for the student to narrate the hadith. ويجوز له رواية ذلك. It is permissible for him to narrate the hadith إذا ظفر بالكتاب, if he succeeds in getting hold of a book, أو بمقابل به, or a verified copy, a matching copy, على وجه يثق معه, in a way that it can be trusted, the copy can be trusted, the match copy can be trusted, بموافقته لما تناوله الإجازة, but because it agrees with what the ijaza is covered with. So كما هو معتبر في الإجازة المجردة عن المناولة, like it is considered to be valid and reliable and absolutely permissible in any ijaza when it is not accompanied with munawala. When any ijaza is considered to be reliable and it is not accompanied with munawala, just like it is permissible, just like any ijaza is permissible and one can narrate the hadith, so similarly this type of ijaza will also be permissible, even though the original copy has been taken back by the teacher. However, the student, he has succeeded in getting a matched copy or verified copy, and it is a trusted source and it agrees with the ijaza, then it is fine. So this is what he's trying to say. So a weaker form of munawala. This is a weaker form of munawala. وَمِن صُوَرِهَا. The teacher gives the book and he grants permission. However, he keeps the original text. The teacher, he keeps the original text. So this form is a weaker form than the previous one. However, the narration, if the student was to narrate, it will require verification. If a student was to narrate the hadith and use the ijaza, it would require verification through the text or matching copy that agrees with what the ijaza has covered. And ending the point, ولا يكاد يظهر في هذه المناولة مزية على الإجازة المجردة الواقعة في معين. Now he is talking about the disagreement over its validity. There's a disagreement over its validity. He's saying that in this type of munawala, في هذه المناولة, in this type of munawala, there hardly appears any distinguishing feature, distinguishing merit. ولا يكاد يظهر في هذه المناولة مزية على In this type of munawala, there hardly appears any distinguishing merit على الإجازة المجردة في الواقعة في معين, over a mere ijaza that is specified to a particular individual, a particular text. Yeah. So there is no distinguishing feature, there is no distinguishing merit over an ijaza that is given over a specified text or a specified individual. However, وقد قال غير واحد من الفقهاء وأصحاب الأصول لا تأثير لها ولا فائدة فيها. Many fuqaha jurists and the scholars of usul have said that there is no legal effect and there is no benefit in this type of munawala. وشيوخ الحديث في القديم والحديث يرون لها مزية معتبرة. However, there are mashayikh, there are shuyukh of hadith in the past and in the present, في القديم والحديث, who have observed and who are of the opinion that this type of munawala does really have a distinguishing merit, distinguishing feature. Why? Because like Shaykh Nur Itar, he says in the Hashia in Ulum al-Hadith, إن في المناولة تأكيدا لمعنى الإخبار. By handing over, end of day, the teacher did hand over the copy to the student. It is a different matter, he took it back, but he did hand it over to the student, though he took it back. So this type of munawala and handing over the hadith collection to the student, this still has a distinguishing feature. إن في المناولة تأكيدا لمعنى الإخبار الذي اشتملت عليه الإجازة وتقوية له. Because initially he did hand over the hadith collection to him, though he took it back later. So it does not matter. So there are some scholars of the past and the present, يرون لها مزية معتبرة. They have considered that this type of munawala does have a distinguishing merit. Wallahu alam. So let us look at the presentation. So in this type of munawala, he's saying there hardly appears any distinguishing merit over a mere ijaza that is specified to a particular individual or text. So there is no difference. There's no distinguishing feature in this type of munawala. So, however, a number of fuqaha and usuliyin have held that it has no legal effect and no real benefit. So this is the view that these scholars have supported. The fuqaha and usuliyin have supported this view that there is no distinguishing feature in this type of munawala. However, there is, and it has been practiced by the scholars of the past and present, that it possesses a distinguishing feature, a merit, an advantage. Like it is mentioned, Shaykh Nur it says, إن في المناولة تأكيدا لمعنى الإخبار. Because the teacher initially he did hand over the hadith collection to the student. So this has the meaning of ikhbar, informing. This is a type of ikhbar which the ijaza consists of, and it is a type of strengthening as well. It is a different thing that he took it back. finally, another form of munawala, and the final form of today, is that أن يأتي الطالب الشيخ بكتاب ويقول, that the student presents a book to the sheikh, ويقول هذا روايتك فناولنيه. The student says to the sheikh, so the student, he hands over to the sheikh a book of hadith, and the student says to the sheikh that this is your riwayah, so can you hand it over to me, can you grant me ijaza of it, وأجز لي روايته, and grant me ijaza of it. فيجيبه إلى ذلك من غير أن ينظر فيه ويتحقق روايته فهذا لا يصح. So the teacher, he gives him a reply without looking into the hadith collection, without verifying the riwayat, the masmu'at. Yeah. فهذا لا يصح, this is not correct, this is invalid. This is invalid because without looking into it, if he grants him ijaza, this should not be valid. So فهذا لا يصح, so he's saying that this is not valid. However, فإن كان الطالب موثوقا بخبره ومعرفته جاز الاعتماد عليه في ذلك. However, if the student of knowledge of hadith, he is relied upon, he is of knowledge himself, then he can rely upon it. He can rely upon the hadith collection. وكانت إجازة جائزة, and this ijaza would be permissible. كما جاز الاعتماد على الطالب في قراءة على الشيخ إذا كان موثوق به معرفة ودينا. Just like it is permissible for a student to rely upon when he reads to a teacher. Just like it is permissible to rely upon a student when this student, he reads to the teacher, and the student is considered to be mawthuq bihi, relied upon, and he has knowledge of the deen, he is full of integrity and righteousness in terms of deen and its knowledge. قال الخطيب رحمه الله, Khatib Baghdadi رحمه الله, he says, ولو قال, if the sheikh says, if the sheikh and teacher says, حدث بما في هذا الكتاب عني, narrate what is in this book from me. If the sheikh says this, إن كان حديثي, if it is my hadith, مع براءتي من الغلط والوهم, with myself absolving myself from all the mistakes and weakness that can be found in the collection. I also free myself of all the weakness that can be found and all the mistakes that can be found in the hadith collection. So he says this to the student. كان ذلك جائزا حسنا. This type of ijaza is permissible and it is fine. Wallahu alam. So let us look at the presentation and into this type of munawala. So a student presents a book as the teacher's narration, and he approves of it. فيجيبه إلى ذلك. The teacher, he approves of it without verification. So this is invalid. فهذا لا يصح. So the student is presenting the book to the teacher. The teacher, من غير أن ينظر فيه ويتحقق روايته, without looking into it and without verifying its riwayah, he gives him a jawab. He approves of it. So this is invalid. However, a trustworthy student may be relied upon. So Al-Khatib Baghdadi has allowed it if the authenticity is confirmed, with the condition that one absolves oneself of any mistakes therein. So Khatib Baghdadi has said, if the Shaykh says that Hadith bima fi hadha al-kitab anni, that narrate hadith from this book with the condition that I absolve myself from the mistakes that can be found therein, then this is permissible. So this was our final discussion today for today's lesson. The lesson summary of today. Number one, we understood that ijaza is commendable only with proper knowledge. and qualification. We learned that ijaza functions as a scholarly concession, tawassu'. Number 3, we understood that the mujaz lahu must be a qualified scholar to ensure reliable transmission. We concluded that the function of ijaza is not merely permissive, but as a safeguard for reliable hadith transmission. So Jazakumullah khairan for participating. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the true understanding what has been studied today with your good selves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Until next week.